hear now from Dr. Eric Strother. Eric earned his PhD in musicology from the University of Kentucky in 2013. He's been a long time adjunct for us. And he is going to talk today about Black Sheep, the contentious world of unblack metal.
Thank you. This is really an outgrowth of my dissertation, which was on Christian heavy metal in general. And one of the things that happened as I was doing that research is I became more fascinated with this aspect of things and the more extreme ends of metal, because there was such a division between what was considered to be at least somewhat acceptable by the church and this stuff. So I've spent a lot of time looking into this more extreme side of things. As you might guess, there's very little scholarly work on this particular body of music. So basically what I've done is I've gotten into some of the online fan groups and made some connections with people there, also some of the musicians there, and also relied on a couple of different documentaries to get the information that I'm working with. Going on the assumption that this isn't a body of music that's familiar to most people, I wanted to give just a little bit of background here. Black metal in general is said to derive from this band, Venom. In particular, this album, 1982, it's their second album entitled Black Metal. Venom was a contemporary of bands like Iron Maiden and Motorhead, Judas Priest in the late 70s, this thing we call the new wave of British heavy metal. But Venom had a different approach to things. Whereas, if you listen to Iron Maiden, you've got a very technical, precise sound coming from them. Venom was kind of like throwback to the garage band days. Three guys, they get their instruments, they turn them up as loud as they can, and they just play whatever happens to come out. They were often referred to more as the Three Buffoons rather than being a serious band. But anyway, one of the other things that set Venom apart was that they really doubled down on that whole idea of Satanism, that had been used since the days of Black Sabbath as kind of a little bit of shock value. But even as these guys point out, when these earlier bands would hit this Satanism theme, they would back off from it. They wouldn't really play into it that much. Venom did. They weren't Satanists themselves, but they really liked to push that idea for the shock value. So, since they began referring to their music as black metal, throughout the 80s, black metal became the term for heavy metal music of any kind that had these satanic lyric themes. So anything from, say, Slayer to Bathory to Celtic Frost and Merciful Fate. Now, in the early 1990s, what we generally think of when we think of black metal came into being. This thing we call the second wave of black metal. It originated in Norway, particularly the guitar player for the band Mayhem bought a music store in Oslo and named it Helvete, which is the Norwegian word for hell. And a lot of these musicians began to hang out there. They talked philosophy, they talked about religion, they talked about music, and this is seen as being the seminal moment for this musical genre we refer to now as black metal. Whereas originally the term was kind of an umbrella term based on lyric themes, now it was becoming a single musical genre based around some of the characteristics you hear in the Venom albums. Low fidelity production value, a lot of screaming and growling rather than actual singing, very fast tempos, those kinds of sounds. In 1994, Nuclear Blast Records releases an album by a band called Horde entitled Helig Usvart, which was the first black metal album to be released with Christian-oriented lyrics. The Helig Usvart translates to holy unblack. And it was not taken very well by the black metal scene. In fact, the reports were that the owner of Nuclear Blast Records received several death threats trying to force him to reveal the name of the artist. This was a one-man project recorded by a guy named Anonymous. It was one of the things with black metal is the use of pseudonyms for the performers. So that guitarist I was mentioning was Euronymous. You have Death, Necro Butcher, all these different names that make these people sound like really nice guys. And so they were trying to pressure the record company to tell them who Anonymous was. Well, it turns out Anonymous was a guy by the name of Jason Sherlock, who had been known as a drummer for several other projects in the Christian metal world. And one of the things, when I asked him about this idea of where he got the idea for unblack metal, he said he was influenced by Dark Throne. They called themselves unholy black metal, and I just reversed it, changing it to holy unblack metal. Simple as that. Well, most of these bands like to think of themselves as trying to create a bridge from the Christian world to this black metal scene where they truly believe people need to hear the gospel, they need to hear the message of Christ, but they're not going to respond to something like the Gaither Vocal Band or some guy in a suit talking to them. But the thing is that they found is that they're not being accepted by either side. For example, or for one, the black metal scene tends to view them as being inauthentic. This comes from a Brazilian extreme metal group that was organizing a protest of a tour of Brazil by the band Ancestor. They referred to it as the true cultural plagiarism called white metal. Now, a lot of people thought that it was interesting that Brazilians were protesting, or were referring to the cultural plagiarism of a Norwegian black metal band doing this, but their point was the idea of white metal, that it wasn't, the Christian lyrics were not compatible with black metal. This is from a member of a band, these Norwegian bands, Nordaval, talking about he ran into this Orthodox Christian black metal band on tour, and it was kind of a surprise to him because they had this deep aggression toward the world, which I could agree with, but it's coming from a totally different standpoint. I can get where they come from, but I don't think they should call it black metal, because black metal is a unique thing, and it definitely has nothing to do with Christianity. And that's the general sense, that black metal and Christianity are completely oppositional forces. Now, if black metal has been unblack metal has been successful in one way of bridging the gap between the church and the black metal scene, it's in this point. Because generally speaking, Christians see it the exact same way. They see it as blending light and darkness. These are some quotes from different music sites. You can't mix Christianity and black metal. That's like mixing God and Satan. Christian black metal is just another way that Satan is getting into the church and leading people to hell. Yeah. Black metal celebrates death. Christianity celebrates life. The two just don't mix. And my favorite of these quotes is this one. You can't have a Christian black metal because black metal is based on ideas that are completely incompatible with Christianity. What are we going to have next? Christian porn? Because one of the arguments that a lot of these supporters use is the words of Paul, that I've become all things to all people so that by all means I may win some. And what they're saying is, yeah, but there's a limit to that. There's a point where it doesn't make sense to try to do this. So, what I have tried to do here is to really dig into this scene and try to see how these musicians and how these fans are negotiating these differences and trying to create this unique musical scene. So I asked on one of these sites just a simple question of, why do you listen to this music? And here's just kind of a sampling of some of the general responses I got. First of all, I love the sound of black metal, but have convictions regarding bands that are clearly anti-Christian. And this is a common theme. They like the sound of the music, but they have a problem with the lyric content. They don't, as Christians, they don't want to listen to things that are demeaning God. And so they listen to this stuff as a way to get that sound that they like without the lyrics they don't like. This one, I find it a useful tool in my faith journey. If I'm angry, I can listen to angry sounding unblack instead of giving into the sin of wrath. And this is kind of a Christianized twist on why a lot of people listen to more extreme music in the first place. That it's an outlet for these negative emotions that they feel. But in this guy's case, he turns it into a faith thing. That he can listen to this and not be bombarded by these angry messages that he might otherwise. This guy, if I'm honest with myself, I like the outsider status. This isn't mainstream music, and some people just like to be, kind of on the outside of the mainstream. But he goes on here at the end. I live in a culture where men are discouraged from showing negative emotions, so metal's a nice outlet. He's looking for a socially acceptable outlet to the things he's feeling in there, and this type of music provides it for him. One last one. I used to listen to all kinds of black metal, but I feel like it had a very negative impact on me because I feel that I'm sensitive to music because of how personal it is to me. I love the atmosphere that black metal creates. I don't find it depressing or draining. I find it artistic, and because there's certainly not a six-figure salary in the industry, there's never any doubt that the person or persons behind the music are incredibly passionate and dedicated to what they're doing. He likes it for the artistry. He listens to it because he feels it's an authentic form of music, not a commercial kind of thing, not something that people are doing it for the money. And so from there, I thought the next logical step is talk to musicians. Why do you play the music? So I asked Jason about this, and he says that he started the Horde Project because he wanted to shine some light into the darkness. I wanted to offer the black metal community an alternative, a different way of looking at the world. All the darkness and the evil music that was coming out of Scandinavia in the early 90s, I wanted to offer an alternative to that, a light version of that. Most of these musicians consider themselves to be missionaries in the same way that a doctor or a teacher who's going into a mission field would be a missionary. That they are doing what they do for the service of Christ to minister to a group of people that otherwise might not get it. And they really, a lot of them even talk about it, this is our mission field. This is what I do. I'm a teacher here, but when I play, I'm a missionary. And so that's a big mentality in this musical field. This guy, Savin, he says Jesus was a rebel against the system. Maybe it's a contradiction for some people, but for us it's the most natural thing in the world to play brutal music with a brutal message. That he feels like the music, the message that's being presented in the gospel, the crucifixion, all the stuff that goes along with that, is something that demands a brutal style. Not something that you nicen up with harps and synthesizers and that kind of thing. But also that it's an extension of who he is. This is what I do, and so the natural thing for me to do as a follower of Christ is to do it for him and for that purpose. I also asked about some of these lyric themes, and one of the things that I've discovered is looking through comparing different lyrics along the way, is that when you take out the philosophical differences, you find a lot of commonalities. Both types of music, whether it's unblack metal or black metal, deal with issues of war, talk about warfare and have these warfare metaphors that go on. They talk about world chaos. They talk about nature. There are all kinds of songs about the snowy mountains and the snowy forests in Scandinavia, and that kind of thing. And there are a lot of hymns of praise. It's just a difference between who the hymn is being sung to. Savin again says that it could be a message about the important matters of life and death. It could be about what's inside of you, what really matters. It could be about love or hate. Basically saying everything is fair game. There's not this particular message that has to be used. A lot of bands are focused on the sacrifice of Christ. Very strong themes like blood and atonement. One of the themes that came out early on was bands tended to be very much anti Satan in their approach to things. And so a lot of them were just basically inverting the themes that they were hearing in regular black metal and presenting them back. And so this guy kind of takes exception to that. He doesn't care for the lyrics that are anti-Christian, like crush the head of Satan and destroy the false prophet kind of things. Because people in Christian black metal don't want to be shunned for their band's lyrical content, so why do it to somebody else? You know, I get why they do it, but it just doesn't seem right to him. There's also a lot of imagery that people have a problem with, particularly if you noticed on the front page, I put some pictures up there. The use of the white makeup with the blood and the white and black makeup, which they refer to as corpse paint, because they're generally painted up to look like zombies or dead bodies. And a lot of people have problems with this. And people carrying swords and axes and that kind of thing. It just doesn't really scream Christian love to a lot of people. And so I asked them how they felt about this imagery. And this guy, who's a very intense guy, everything he writes is super intense. He talks about, it's all about warfare. And you see it in the war paint and the swords and the armor. Expressing your love for him in warrior ways may disturb many Christians. But Christian black metal is the identity of warriors who will fight the good fight as men of war. And so they see it, they tie this aggressive nature, this aggressive message to things. And a lot of the lyric themes do tend to get into some dark areas, as you might expect. It's a very emotionally intense genre, and Unblack is no exception. People who are misguided by the darkness of this style, and people in the darkness who are willing to take the hand reached out to them. In other words, these are people who aren't going to be reached by messages of unicorns and rainbows. These are people who are into some dark things, have very dark thoughts and feelings, and they are looking for answers in that. There are dark things in life, and I don't have a problem with the bands addressing them as long as it's done through the Christian lens and not glorifying the darkness. Back to that original idea of the separation. We basically have two schools of thought on this. Jason Sherlock is convinced that there is a difference, that true black metal has evil satanic lyrics. Saying Christian black metal is like saying satanic Christian metal. It just doesn't make sense. There's that very strong line of thinking. On the other side is the idea that no philosophy is truly tied to any genre of music. He understands horde was a play on words, and he's right here. Metal is very punny in the way it approaches things, and it kind of doesn't take itself totally seriously a lot of the time. But to call in a whole separate scene because of the lyrical content doesn't make sense. I mean, we don't call blues music with positive lyrics unblues. And someone else was talking about the idea that a pop song about a basketball game is still a pop song. And a country song that's about this dark, grim forest is still a country song. We don't have special names for those types of music, so why should we do it here? And the last thing that I talked with them about was the idea of being rejected by that scene. Because they're desiring to be accepted, they feel like because of their music, they should be accepted, but they're not. And this Pilgrim, who I suspect is from the band that was being mentioned at the beginning, the Nordeville, I suspect that's the band he was talking about. But he was talking about how these people have never met us and they want to kill us, they want to beat us up and all these kinds of threats. I think it's ridiculous. They're threatening us because they're feeling threatened or scared of what we're doing. There has this sense that introducing lyrics of hope and Christ into this black metal scene is really threatening to some people who are tied into this negative thing. And some people just don't understand what it's all about. If you listen to the music and not read the lyrics, then you'd probably just call it black metal. That you wouldn't really make this distinction unless you were really paying attention to what the lyrics were about. He doesn't understand, maybe they have a different understanding of Christianity, maybe they've been treated badly about it. But at the bottom line for it came down to this quote. They're scheduled to play at this festival, and 2 days after the news was released, on their webpage they had a thread in their guest book called Religious Lunatics. And half the people were really upset that we were allowed to play, and the other half were very upset at those who were upset. So there were a lot of angry people and a lot of people angry at the angry people. But after we played, it was just a lot of positive response. You know, there are some who can't accept it, but then again, they shouldn't have to. And that's the general sense. That a lot of these bands felt like that they've had a lot of resistance, and they've had these people who would come out and they would say all these negative things about them and protest them and throw stuff on the stage. But once they started listening to the music, once the music started, and after it was over with, a lot of those people changed their minds. You know, it's kind of that idea that, you know, they're rejecting the thing that based on what they think it's like. But then once they hear it, they begin to understand that really they're, you know, it's the idea that the music kind of covers everything. That if you're good at what you do, then people don't care as much about you know, what else goes along with that. And so that's where a lot of these bands stand now, is that once they can get people to listen to them, then they're finding a lot more acceptance. And so I'm hoping to take this a little bit further in the future. I've taken a break from it now, but this is kind of my initial findings on how the scene plays out.